quickly everybody had phones, cell phones, then everybody had smartphones. And so the most powerful device for changing those very things that I had noticed had changed in myself, sense of time, sense of place, sense of identity, memory, attention. And so I had some things to figure out, which is what the book is about. So this is from the introduction, or the adapted essay from the introduction, which is called Inner Climate Change. After living alone for nearly 2 years in a house in the northern Vermont woods, I returned to the city, alert in all the wrong ways. The timpani of the symphony playing in a Chinese restaurant struck soon to bound through the wall. At first glance, every streetlight seemed a full moon. I'd gone through a kind of inner climate change. My attention had dilated to take in the subtleties of the woods and weather. My memory to navigate miles of drifted snow. Reacclimating to the city would have been challenge enough, but there was an extra. Early aughts, screens were suddenly everywhere, and everyone else was going through inner climate change too. On my daily snowshoe treks through the trees, I'd begun to be able to see black-capped chickadees, no matter the camouflage of the snowy branches. My eyes gone soft, the space between the trees would flicker with movement. On rare phone calls with my friend Ray, I realized I was listening the same way, not hunting for what he wasn't saying about his medical school unease, but just picturing everything he said and waiting for a flicker in the spaces in between. My memory was opening too. As I unloaded groceries from the village market, the songs that had been playing on the overhead speakers would follow like a souvenir map. Without any effort, I could remember my progress, lyric by lyric, through the aisles. When I lifted a package of ramen from the shopping bag one afternoon, Elton John's Rocket Man pulled after it like a thread. I missed the earth so much, I miss my wife. I've been reaching for the ramen at the end of aisle 3. It's lonely out in space. I'd rounded the potato chip display, and I think it's going to be a long, long time till touchdown around again to find I've been reaching into the cooler for the orange juice, where I'd pause to listen. I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. Maybe this happened because of my long daily walks in the woods, and my brain's new habit of absorbing everything it could as reference points. Maybe it happened because I didn't hear music anywhere outside the market, and Rocket Man is a weirdly memorable song. Either way, everything I encountered or didn't encounter was quietly altering my sense of time, my sense of place, and the quality of my attention and memory. What I was experiencing was changing how I was experiencing. Perhaps even stranger, there was no way to feel those changes being made. I could only register they had been. Became a kind of radio. Humans evolved to have plasticity in order for us to survive, and evolution did such a good job that the basic structure of the human brain hasn't needed to change in the past 40,000 years. Our adaptations to new places and ways of life, to being hunters and gatherers in Africa, to navigating the streets of modern-day cities, as a famous study of London cabbies has shown, posterior hippocampi, it's plural for hippocampus, my editor told me, that posterior hippocampi is notably greater than that of the average Londoner. And now to tapping our way through digital life, all happen within our 40,000-year-old brains, through the strengthening of links between neurons, through the growth of new neurons and synapses. Basically, we begged out of evolution by developing brains adaptable enough to handle the changes in our physical and cognitive environments on their own. As the Nobel Prize-winning biologist Gerald Edelman pointed out with his theory of neural Darwinism, selection works at the cellular level within each person's lifespan, much as natural selection works at the species level over many generations. Our brains adapt to our environments to help us survive. But to less sensory information in the woods, everyone else's had adapted to more. Screens mushroomed in nearly everybody's hand. And for a 40,000-year-old brain, flashes and resulting dopamine hits, and the social threats and resulting fight or flight responses might as well have been happening in a new kind of forest. Cognitive traits shifted in ways that were maladaptive to life offline. Our attention spans dropped, our ability to be alone waned. 6 out of phone, and subjects in one study chose to receive electroshocks rather than confront quote-unquote solitude. And we lost our ability, quite literally, to be where we are. 25% of US car accidents are tied to texting. I felt like a tawny owl whose plumage had gone whiter in some remote snowy outpost, only to return to find the trees had gone brown due to climate change, and now demanded brown plumage to thrive. To live needed not to pay attention to most things, and not to remember most of what you saw. Sound effects. High budget. But I wasn't sure I wanted to lose the brain the woods had given me. Not that I needed to remember every lyric from the aisles of the grocery store. Not that I didn't want to be able to filter out more of what I saw flashing on screens. But I wanted to hold on to a kind of attention that could wait for answers to questions I didn't know how to ask. And to hold on to a kind of memory that recalled whatever I needed as a means of orientation, as a way of knowing where I fit in the world. But the adaptations of my choice, I could make choices only about my screen time and hope the trades were worth it. Not just the trades on my time, which I could track, and my data, which I couldn't, but the trades on my cognitive traits. My attention span for every hour I spend on social media. What happens to my memory? And what happens to my openness? For the majority of the past 40,000 years, there was no possibility of a virtual realm superimposed on the physical realm we walked through. No possibility of getting caught daily between two different environments, between traits for one realm that were ill-suited to the other. Now, almost 2 decades after my return from the woods, I still long for a new kind of map. A map with the digital world and the traits it calls for, and with the old physical world and the traits it calls for, and with the borders clearly marked where the two realms conflict, where the border crossings are treacherous, where we're bound to lose the parts of ourselves we value. So we know the trades we're making, so we don't get lost and lose ourselves in the digital woods. All right, so that's from the intro. That should give you a sense of what the book is about. Do we want to? People can get food.
Yeah,
If it's a perfect break.
This is a good breaking point. Is that
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys are setting that up.
Oh, you're saying you're going to wait because you're not just
No.
yeah.
No, I was just help.
Hi, Margaret.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I couldn't speak.
Thank you.
Oh, what woods did you live in?
The Northeast Kingdom in northern Vermont.
Oh. For how long?
2 years.
2 years. And did you have visitors? Or take a break?
There was one break for Thanksgiving,
Okay.
which went really badly. Really badly.
Really?
Yeah, that's in there. Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't read your book. Sorry.
that's in the first.
I didn't one. Okay.
I got hassled by the police.
Oh,
Just because the
wow.
way I was walking through this neighborhood,
Yeah,
a woman saw me out the window was really alarmed because I was walking slowly,
yeah,
just looking at the trees.
right.
So 2 cop cars converged on me.
Oh, my
Like,
God.
what are you doing? Why are you like, just for walking
Right, slowly.
slowly?
Well, it wasn't.
In his long underwear, I recall from that.
That's a minor detail. Is that illegal?
Is that
now?
a problem?
That's in the book, I recall.
No, you're absolutely
It's a nice detail.
right. Yeah.
And you were just in a cabin that you had rented for that period of time? Or?
Yeah, I didn't even have to rent it. 'Cause
Yeah.
The guy just wanted someone there so the pipes wouldn't freeze.
Oh, okay.
So animals wouldn't
Yeah.
take it over.
Okay. And you didn't have any neighbors for miles, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And Outward Bound, and you do a solo.
Right.
I mean, it's like, 48 hours.
Right, but if
But I
that's
understand that, like, perceptiveness that you got,
right.
that is very acute and like, yeah.
It really changes the way
Yeah.
you experience it.
Yeah, it really does. It's pretty cool. And you start hearing yourself.
You mean your own thoughts.
Yeah. Because they're not like interrupted all the time.
Right.
Yeah, so we were just talking in the grad class that I'm teaching now, just community design about our body's relationship to like our devices and how it like
Changes the shape.
changes like the shape of like how we hold ourselves.
Right.
And we were talking about like phones down, how like it's uncomfortable, so like it's not like designed this way. Changing our brains. I'm like, what's the science?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my so I have a friend who's lived in India for 20 years. When she came back, she said that was one of the things she noticed, and she teaches yoga, so she's very aware. That was one of the things she noticed immediately, which is that posture over their clothes instead of going forward.
Yeah, and it's like
Right.
our sight.
Right. I said, yeah, but and the most marked changes are range.
Yeah, which is and the most like it's the most like
And the most, it's the most invisible.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the hardest. Well, that's yeah, that's the thing.
Right, so that's what you're saying. It would be nice to know when you're making this trade-off. And you
What are
really
the
don't
pressures?
know because it's part of your navigating your world.
Yeah. Very hard to inspect it. So maybe I'll say this again, but perspective is it's not where you're looking from, it's what you're looking through.
Right.
That's the root of the word.
Yeah.
Through. But it's almost impossible to get a sense of what you're looking through because you're looking through it.
Right, exactly.
There's like an interface, like the frame of how we're experiencing it.
That is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So it becomes very difficult to know. These shifts are until you get one of those moments where suddenly, like me coming back and seeing that I love the groceries.
Right. Yeah, that's
Remember
pretty
everything without
amazing.
trying to remember it.
Yeah.
That I was talking to my friend in a way that I hadn't, until you actually see the change show up, you don't know that your brain is shifting.
Yeah. And since you hadn't talked to people for
I rarely talk to people.
long periods of time, what was it like then interacting with humans again? I guess I need to read it first.
Maybe, yeah. Hard.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
It's very hard. Yeah. I'm just curious about.
Yeah.
You know what time it is? Which one?
We usually go till like 1:30.
Okay. Just think of what I should. Okay. Clouds.
I mean, it's a research library. No, we sort of noticed everyone is but these things like there, we're directing a number of other programs. I think it's to end up at somewhere like the society, like in we have heading that up. But yeah, he said he can teach it. Like, you know, it's different to have that kind of like 95 hours. I'm okay to have it kind of done for the day. Shift. Yeah.
One more way.
I have plenty of colleagues at home, but thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And all those ideas, experiencing changing the brain was so much. Like, I spent my youth on doing those.
I know. Yeah.
The glass of water, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, either.
I can.
Okay,
I went to high school with basically everybody in my high school had it.
yeah, same. Yeah, same.
Yeah. Did you see that commercial?
Yeah.
Pack
It's like everybody went to high school with.
Pack the cat, pack Swampscott, pack the hammer, pack socket, packed it. I have packed it. Yeah.
Yeah, that resonated.
Yeah, my brother was like, we were all talking about that commercial, which is, and then actually one of the uses of Wicked was wrong.
Oh, good.
Wicked's an advert.
Yeah.
And when the car pulls up, she's like, oh, Wicked.
Oh.
No, it'd be like, Wicked awesome. Wicked pizza. Yeah. One question I have about that car, I mean, it's wicked cool.
It's really cool.
However, if someone smart parks next to you in one of those, you can't get into your car. Right? It's a little tight thing and someone can't.
Right.
So that person just goes, how are you supposed to open the driver's? How are you supposed to? So then, my brother and I were talking about an SNL skit with like water. Says, he snap bags. He's like, I snap back. Get a snap back. Snap back.
Yeah, that'll be the new.
It's one relation of we live in SUVs too, it's so safe. Yeah, if you're in one.
Right.
If you get to an accident in one, it's a lot more dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, in the humanities design.
No, I'm sure that
They make hands.
Design and like
To think of
design
these-
field.
And
So,
then, you just reprogram.
Yeah,
I guess, well, they had like social scientists, psychologists, yes, but it's also like.
So
Yeah, like,
It's
it's
just like
we
super
can
animal.
do it.
So instead of like hiding it, it's like,
Someone is now,
but then they can just print out as the kids go.
jam you in.
So I don't have to project for it.
What happens to the other?
Right, especially if it's not like accessible, they.
And if you're a person, I don't know, some people say,
That's right.
hard for you to can't climb in through the side hashtag or something.
Yeah.
You're 22 years old.
Yeah, they printed it. It's the prototype.
Yeah.
I think going to engineering school is probably where I feel like the most rudimentary.
They take forever.
Okay, keep enjoying your food and go back for second sip, and we'll continue on with the discussion.
So I'm glad you all got some food. So I hope that introduction really presents the main question that's driving the book forward, which is what happens when adapting to a new environment means losing traits that you value? How do you determine what those traits, especially when they're hidden, in large part? Some point in the book, I make the comparison to Let's Make a Deal show, where people are trading in unknowns. Like, will you trade box number 1 for curtain number 3, not knowing what's inside either one? And that's often what we're doing with our phones in terms of our cognitive traits. We don't really know. Neuroscientists don't really know how this stuff is affecting our brain. So we know some of what we're getting in terms of what information we might be getting, but we also don't know, and we know some of what we're giving some of our time, but we also don't know what we're trading in terms of traits. So how do you figure out what traits to make? Adapting, of course, is pretty important. You don't need to be Darwin to know that. But what happens if you don't want to adapt because you want to preserve certain traits? So that's what I'm looking at in the book. There are 6 chapters. The first one is about sense of play to our maps. So it's about the importance of navigation. And with each chapter, I set it up with the traits that we might be losing. Survey map, which is just the ability to have a sense of place from above, which might not sound all that important, but it is, because unless you have a sense of a place from above, it's very hard to wander. It's very hard to feel comfortable getting lost if all you know is how to get from point A to point B. And that ability to get lost becomes really important, not just for feeling comfortable if you're trying to get someplace and you can't find your way, but in a deeper personal and even spiritual way, that in order to find parts of yourself that you don't yet know, you have to be able to wander. You have to. And without that, so if Dante had the GPS, he's never getting lost in the water, having to go down into the underworld. Odysseus on the wine dark sea, if he's got the GPS, there goes the whole Odyssey, right? He makes it home, great, and Penelope's probably happier. But think of all that he loses out on. Think of what he doesn't discover in himself. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, time, what happens to our sense of time. The big endangered trait there is flow, feeling of flow, where you lose sense of time. And I talk about how often if you're online, if you're going down a rabbit hole, there can be a sense of pseudo flow, where you feel like time just vanishes, 2 hours pass, and then you look up and sun's gone down, and you know everything you ever wanted to know about Bradley Cooper or Lady Gaga or whoever. But meanwhile, what's just happened for the last 2 hours? Chapter 3, which I'll read a little excerpt from, is frames. So what sets the frame for how we're experiencing the world? And I'll talk about endangered traits when I read from that. Chapter 4 is attention span. You know, there are all these studies that show our attention spans are plummeting. The one that's most often cited is that our attention spans are now less than that of a goldfish. Attention span of a goldfish, I don't really know. That seems a little dicey. But nevertheless, attention spans are on the wane. That's important. So also, what are attention spans really made of? That's pretty interesting. Chapter 5 is, so the progression is from interior, so sense of place and time, to more exterior. So happening to our sense of ourselves, and the main thing that's endangered there is spiritual self. That comes from a William James framework where he talks about these concentric circles of the self, where the outermost one is material self, that's then the social self, that's how everybody thinks about it, that's how many likes we're getting on Facebook or whatever, and then deeper than that is the spiritual self, which now is, I think a lot of people are very estranged from. The last chapter is conversation. What's happening in the way we talk to each other, what's happening in the way we talk about politics, major questions for our civic lives, for our personal lives. So that's the movement of the book. And one of the things that's being lost there is large conversational boxes. That means having enough space to talk about things with nuance and complexity. And with that, we're losing. Empathy is down 40% in college students over the last 20 years. 40%. Remarkable. And that's also worth thinking about. So why is that important? Why is that happening? Why is that significant? Okay, so that gives you a sense of the book and how it works. These endangered things for you to talk about during the Q&A, which we'll get to in a second. The chapter on frames. And so the are wonder, which seems pretty important, and then connected to wonder deeply, and being aware that there are things that maybe aren't there on the surface. Taking the time to appreciate what you can't know about another person, or about something in nature that we're looking at, or and this is the shift from the personal and maybe the spiritual to the civic and to the political, or about something we're reading about online or in the news or something we're hearing from politicians. How do you look more deeply into those things, spend more time paying attention to those things when we are being driven by a kind of glimpse attention? And that's what so much, and the visual rhetoric that we're surrounded by is not, it's the very opposite of art that asks us to look slowly, that asks us to look more deeply. And when we're surrounded by things that are meant for us really not to look, when we're being given messages that we're not supposed to consider deeply, how do you get past that? And so one of the things that's in danger of being lost there is what the philosopher Hannah Arendt calls our truth compass. Our ability to sort of distinguish reality or fact from fiction, which is a pretty important thing given our climate, political and otherwise, to not lose. All right, so I'll just read a couple pages. At a crowded party last fall, a technology firm told me he was working on AR. Steve's shorter than I am, and we were together, our glasses of wine terraced between us, so he could raise his arm to drink only when I drank. The party was echo chamber loud. I thought he said he was working on air, and I wasn't sure if he was joking. Didn't know it could be improved. What? The air. No, AR. What's that? Augmented reality, like Google Glass, but better. It'll probably be contact lenses. You just wear them all the time. You get information about whatever you're looking at, plus updates for your social media, your texts, everything. Steve has a straight man's delivery. He sometimes writes comedy, but he wasn't joking. So what would my AR tell me now? Anything. That this wine got 237 mediocre reviews, that I'm a stud on Twitter, or the spread on tomorrow's Pats game if we were being bros and talking about the Pats. Do it hear what we're saying? Pretty cool, right? This is going to happen. It's next level. You won't have to look down at your phone. I look down at my drink. There will be some issues, like how much advertising will be allowed and what it would mean if someone didn't wear lenses. Steve nudged me, like what would happen to them? What would happen to them? I pictured an AR resistor in the stocks, information being flashed before his eyes. Even my public shaming references were out of date. I'm just messing with you, sort of. It won't be easy to live if everyone else has AR and you don't. It'd be like everyone was on information steroids, and you'd be the skinny kid in the corner, unable to compete. He said this matter-of-factly. Eventually, we unterraced our arms, and I made my way to the balcony for some air. It was a warm night, mist floating under the streetlight's glow. The party hummed. A black cat skulked along a low wall. What Steve was describing wasn't just a metaphor, like a real contact lens, a visual acoustic-guide overlay, one designed not by knowledgeable life docents. Who would they be, anyway? But by mostly young men, likely in skinny jeans, trying to make their first billion. I imagine the station wagon in a driveway across the street, labeled with make, model, and resale value. The woman moving behind the curtain, trailed by a floating CV. I remember the old woman Mrs. Dalloway watches in the apartment building across the street from her own. A woman climbing her stairs, then parting her curtains, and looking out her window, not knowing she is being seen. How Mrs. Dalloway feels something solemn in the woman's privacy, especially as the old woman retreats to the back of her bedroom. How Mrs. Dalloway sees her as a kind of mirror for what is unseen and unknowable in herself. Quote, and the supreme mystery was simply this. Here was one room, there another. Mrs. Dalloway feels close to the old woman because she recognizes her unknowability and so becomes more at ease with her own. How are we going to feel that sense of communion, that common isolation of having a consciousness separate from everyone else, if our eyes are being flooded with the impression that everyone and everything can be known? How will we wonder about each other? I imagine seeing the forecast, an advertisement for the company behind the flagstone walkway, a flag noting an open McDonald's 1.2 miles away. Even the smoky streaks of cloud above the roof couldn't escape labeling, strapped as though stuck on a collector's pin. I felt like a King Midas of the eye. Everywhere I looked hardened into information that might have been useful if everything around it hadn't hardened too. Are we on time?
Let me ask my phone.
Yeah.
So, 106.
106. All right, so maybe I'll stop reading there so we have time for Q&A. At the bookstore, this is always the best part, just because people have lots of questions, and then there's lots of stuff to look into, to talk about, to consider. So if you have Q, I should have A. Yes.
Great reading, Howie. You mentioned empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy is down. First of all, I would be interested in how empathy is. Sure, there must be various ways of doing that, but also, are you connection between the use of technology and the decline in empathy? And that connection be made?
Right. Important question. So the study on empathy that says it's down 40% in college students in the last 20 years is out of the University of Michigan. And it's interesting the way they were measuring it, because they were measuring it in a pretty basic way, questionnaires. And the questions were, there were statements, and then students were supposed to mark true or false, or how much they felt they agreed with those statements. And they were just basic, really basic statements, like, if I walk down the street and see someone, it gives me pause, or I care, or something like that. Or if I don't really care when I see someone who's hurting, and so what that means is to mark true or false. What that means is, if students, it's very clear what the answer is if you want to show that you have empathy. To bolster their own scores for empathy, they very easily could have lied, or at least, exaggerated, as people often do on these sorts of tests. So, and these studies were going on over a long period of time. So either empathy itself is really dropping, or at the very least, the way people value empathy is dropping, because they're not, maybe 20 years ago, people were lying a lot more and boosting their empathy scores. But now it seems we don't value empathy. I certainly don't think honesty is on the rise. So we can discount that. So what that means is that people aren't trying to answer the questions in such a way that show that they have empathy. So my bet is that it's a combination of the two, that we value empathy less, and in fact, that empathy has gone down. So why would we value empathy less? Well, because business, efficiency, we're supposed to move fast, you're supposed to not be too soft, you're supposed to care about yourself. I think that's part of it. And then there's this question of, and why. So the other reason, and I think a major reason, although the study cannot make a between correlation and causation, and can we establish that this is definitely causation? No, they don't do that. However, the 20-year time period, it corresponds pretty directly, and the drops have been a lot more precipitous in the last 10 years. So that would suggest maybe, but then there's a question of why would this happen? And so my sense of that, and the studies didn't go into that, but my sense of that is the framework on social media. Medium is the message. It's not just the message, it's also an environment. And the framework is something that we all absorb, which is, with every single post you were supposed to like, or not like, or love, or retweet, or you're supposed to judge it. You're supposed to judge it. And you know that you can get credit, sort of points, social, you can get dopamine hits if your post is judged well. You can also get all kinds of hits or dopamine blast for your brain if you judge something else well. So judging becomes a performance of identity. And especially with identity politics and correctness, judging in such a way that you're performing, that you sort of have the right take on something about it, or quicker about it, or parse if you had some great post about the Super Bowl halftime show, which is, there's a lot of things happening in that halftime show. It's pretty tricky to figure out. But if you can post the right thing about it, that's showing you're aware of empowerment, you're aware of all these important things, of credit for it online. If the more we internalize that framework, that okay, I'm supposed to perform my identity, and I do it through judgment on things, and then I can respond to everything else through these judgments, the harder it becomes not to constantly be judging each other and judging ourselves. I mean, one of the things that's gone way up, and I didn't put, but that's a big part of it. If people, especially students, are constantly aware that they're going to be judged, and that if you're off by a little bit, someone's going to cancel you or slam you, or that's really anxiety producing. Really anxiety producing. I mean, it corresponds, if you're looking at the evolutionary biology of it and what it corresponds to in our brains, it corresponds to the fear of being ostracized. You're in your group, you're part of your group, and if you get rejected, you're going to have to go spend the night alone in the bush. And who knows what's going to happen. So we are hardwired to fear being ostracized, to fear being pushed out of the social group. And I think social media plays on that fear. It plays on those dopamine hits where we feel like people like us and we're being received well, and then it plays on the fear of being rejected. So you keep checking, like, how many hits did I get? How much are people liking me? And it's hard, it's really hard not to do it. The Oliver Sacks Foundation posted about my book, which was really nice of them, and I have a lot of followers on Facebook, so I'm not used to this so much. But I kept like, how many people retweeted this? How many people? Why don't I have more hearts? What's wrong with me? Where are my hearts?
You talk at the beginning about the value of quietness and of being away from screens. I wonder if you think about that in relation to meditation.
Yeah, I think it's a similar, there's a similar benefit. Just what happens, for me, I try to go for a long walk every morning, and I live someplace where there's some trees, and I walk along a canal, so it's nature preserve. And I think part of the benefit of that, or with meditation, is having a frame of reference that's bigger than whatever your daily concerns are. Being connected larger than yourself, which is really important. So when I'm going for a walk, I can look at the birds, or look at what's happening with the weather, the sky, and just have that sense of, oh, there are patterns. This is where the light was yesterday. This is where the light is today. Patterns that are much bigger than ourselves, and that can help give us more room to accommodate whatever anxieties, oh, I'm not getting more hearts on Twitter, we have, or whatever, significant losses or whatever we're dealing with. Having that sense of space that is much larger than our daily concerns is really important. At the end of the book, was an astronomer in Chile, and she's in I learned about her through this movie called Nostalgia for the Light. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, there were all these political prisoners who were disappeared by the Pinochet regime. But this is also where there's an observatory, because it's one of the driest places on Earth. And so the observatory, so that these astronomers are looking into deep space, trying to look back, and trying to understand things. And meanwhile, there are lots of older people, mostly women, who are digging in the sand for remains of their loved ones who were disappeared by this regime. So, and were disappeared. She works, I think she works at the observatory, and she was saying that for her, connecting the two, she was saying for her, thinking about cosmic time and deep space helps give her room to accommodate the loss of her parents, helps her have more space to try to understand that which is unfathomable. And how do we have enough for our for our grief and for the things that that we encounter in life. And I'm not looking through telescopes that millions of years in the past. Walk and having that sense of the seasons, having that sense of the natural world, I think is really helpful.
I'm so struck by when you were talking about wonder a while ago, and I think you said or implied that people going to their smartphones sort of obviates for wonder,
right.
And room for getting lost and looking for things. And I mean, this so resonates with me. But do you ever find that when you ask a rhetorical question when you teach, this is something like a measurable reduction of wonder time when you say some kind of thought experiment and people whip out their phones and start to look it up,
Oh, really?
it's an answerable question.
Huh.
Have you ever noticed that? I mean, or at a dinner party or something. It's
answerable
immediately.
That's really interesting. So in class I don't allow.
I don't either anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the one example, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's so important, I think, for wonder, that sense that that there are lots of things that have not yet been answered, but also that there's a lot that is unanswerable.
That the point is to wonder about it.
Yeah, and also that the deepest mysteries in life are unanswerable. The best questions are questions to which we don't have answers, and it's a very different mindset. So I come from a family of lawyers, and my brother was he was prosecutorial, and so he already had it where he would only ask questions to which he thought he knew the answers, like, did you or did you not take the ice cream out of the freezer? Did you or did you not? So those sorts of questions I'm less comfortable with for all kinds of reasons. But the questions, like when my nieces were little, I loved asking them those sorts. Where does the sky start? And they just start. It doesn't start. Where does it? Those sorts of questions. There is no. They're invitations to wonder. So yeah, one example that I give in the book, and it's a little different, but it corresponds, and it has to do with people whipping out their phones. So on the phone with my friend, and somehow the movie St. Elmo's Fire came up because I started singing the theme song. Because this was my college roommate, and we do all these weird things when we're on the phone. So he was singing that terrible theme song, and he said, "So who was in that movie anyway?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I remember Demi Moore was in it, and Amelia." And he's like, "Hold on, let me." And I kind of heard him go away, and then suddenly he's like,
Ali Sheedy.
Ali Sheedy, Rob Lowe, and he's got but I was trying to figure out, well, I remember this scene, and I was just trying to remember. And then I said something about the breakfast. He's like, "And who was in that?" And then he's going, and he's just reading. Yeah, he's reading it. He's looking it up. And I don't really care what the full cast going through. Like, what scenes do I remember? What scenes does he remember? Because that's in our memories, and how those memories correspond to who we are. Yeah. And so what stands out to you? Oh, I remember this. Oh, the scene I remember is this. Oh, I remember that. That's much more interesting. Yeah. Because it's a way into each other and into our past. And the facts they're facts. We get the full list, but that just cuts off the wonder. That sort of cuts off the, basically like going through a photo album of your memories. Oh, what's in my album? What's in your album? That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just that anecdote and the part that you read about the AR,
right,
and seeing the world augmented by information. I wonder how that's already happening in our brains, even without the devices. So when you were talking about kind of space for meditative practices and walking in nature in the morning,
right.
And try to think about what color it is, and what the texture of the waves is this morning. But my own brain is already then taking what my experience is and adding or augmenting it with information and therefore with anxiety. So it's a lot warmer this winter, isn't it?
processing like climate. And
Right.
Like I don't have, I can't have direct experience with nature because I'm worried about it.
Right.
You know, and so I'm just thinking about how that is part of our access to we do know everything, and we do have these like systematic understanding that are partly enabled by technology, but are also just part of our condition at this moment.
Right.
I don't know if you.
Right. No, I understand, and that's yeah, it's something I think about, and I can notice sometimes on my walks, sort of how far away is whatever that worry is, or whatever that, basically how many perceptions do you get before it's there, and as that space contracts, it's, you know, you're one step away. You just look at, oh, it's warmer. Oh, who's the president going to be here? You know, like, oh, you're just one step instead of you have room for maybe 3 thoughts or something that where there's an association where you think back. Oh, I remember when I was, and not like and not I was by the lake as a kid and I didn't have to think about this enough, but just, you know, more pleasant to have room. And I do think there's that sense we have to be on high alert always, because this stuff is around us and it's real, and what are we doing about it? And yet being on high alert always makes it pretty difficult to act, actually, when there's not. It's difficult to relax. It makes it difficult to enjoy what there is to enjoy, and it can lead to, you know, all kinds of anxiety and a sense of fatalism or futility. You know, there's all that. So how to acknowledge what the facts are and what is real that are around us, and also to have more space for ourselves to walk by the lake or to walk and feel at home in some way, you know, in our bodies and in the natural world, which is really important. I don't have the answer to those. Those are hard questions, because certainly the more that those spaces contract, the less resilient.
I mean, I was sort of thinking about what you're talking about, and I'm now kind of thinking about involved in making those connections. So I recently turned off the push notifications on my phone. You know, the ones that come from New York Times that tell you all bad things.
Right.
As sort of an experiment to see like impact my daily life in terms of sort of how I saw myself, but, you know, like also how I felt about things.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about sort of the relationship between like technology, and you have the, you know, you're making that connection. But I'm sort of wondering about if technology is sort of, and that, you know, like that great example of the AR reduces sort of like the individual agency.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's a really important connection you're making, because to a degree, we have some control over our digital environments. You know, are you receiving those updates? How often are we looking at our phones? Because our brains are going to adapt to that environment as though it is a real woods that we're walking through. And if we're walking through woods where there's always this danger flashing, I mean, imagine that it's 40,000 years ago and you're walking, and there's always, oh, there's this threat, there's that threat, and that's what you're going to be pretty keyed up. And so even when there's not a threat right around you, you're something, your brain is going to link, oh, like, remember that thing we just saw, remember. So how do you have some agency to take some control over your digital environment so that you're not on constant alert? Because that system, because our bodies our brain will start to look for it. The example I give in the book is the boy who cried wolf. And the boy who cried wolf, you know, he cries wolf, they come running, all the villagers come running, there's a wolf attacking the sheep, there's nothing there. He does it again, there's nothing, and then finally he cries wolf, and, you know, they don't come. But so our brains are like that, but the thing is, our brains sort of get excited every time there's that cry, there's that danger. And it doesn't really matter whether there's a wolf there or not. Our brains get the same hit. So, and there's all the stuff that courses through us. So we'll as long as we're put ourselves in a digital environment, getting these warning flashes that for the most part aren't changing that much. You know, it's some, and now especially with the media cycle, it's like a soap opera. You don't have to check in every day to know how bad it is. You can check in or every 20 minutes to know how bad it is. What's happening? What was he going to say? You know what he's going to say. I mean, there are things that actually are news, like what happened in Iowa. Okay, that's news. That was unexpected. But a lot of it is just they're just feeding this cycle, and they have to. So how can you have agency and change your digital environment so you have a little more space to have more strength and more peace of mind to deal with these very real problems? Because certainly hearing about it, 20 times a day is not going to help you.
Well, this reminds me of a conversation that I was having with the digital humanities students last night when we were reading about interaction design, and one of these sort of top designers in this text that was both foundational, but we realized quickly outdated, written in 2006, and he describes how they're designing all of these, they're designing the World Wide Web and the internet and technology as a way to fit kind of around the human experience, so that like the human is first, and like maybe the technology is like there for when they want it and not there for when they don't, and that this is what it's going to be. You say like this is what's going to happen is that technology will just be there for when we, and we're all saying like, well, that didn't happen. less than 15 years later, right? It's already that our lives are molded in many ways around the technology instead of the other way around. I mean,
Yeah. So
sorry.
No, I was actually I want to add something to what Catherine said here, that the loss of agency and also then feeling like if I don't respond to what's happening, even if it's really important. So like currently the political situation in India is really fragile. So every time I get it's like, oh, you know what's happening? I'm like, I'm in Chicago. My commentary is not going to do anything. I'm just going to feel anxious about what's happening to you all. So why don't we not talk about it? And I come across something like someone with lack of empathy or someone not sensitive to the political situation, but it's like, I'm too far removed from the reality right now. When I'm back in December, you talk about it then. We'll see what I can do. But there's nothing I can do from here. So it's that sense that you want to be listening to everybody's voices, but also not being able to accommodate everyone's problems in your own brain. Worry about.
Right. Yeah, it's a really important point, because technology collapses time and space. It just brings everything together. Yeah. And I think it was Italo Calvino who talked about space exists. Like it's helpful to have some room, and time exists so everything doesn't happen at the same time. But now it feels as though everything's happening. It's always happening, and it's all happening at the same time, and it's overwhelming.
And it's happening in the same place because it's happening with you wherever you are.
Wherever you are, it's happening, and and you're not wanting to hear about it is not because you're not empathetic and you don't care. You don't want to hear about it because you are empathetic and you do care, and it's not going to help at all to hear about it however many times. This is it's really bond, and so what we privilege is availability. Like how come it took you 5 minutes to, instead of presence, instead of actually being present when you're with someone. That's a real shift. So I do think it's up to, it gets back to agency. It is up to us, because the way this stuff is designed, the people running it are very smart and very cagey, and their agendas are not the same agendas that we have. Their agendas are making money. Their agendas are capturing your attention. So how do you then have agency to figure things out for yourself so that your attention isn't constantly being captured, and so you don't feel like a bad citizen or a bad sister or brother, or if you're not constantly falling prey to it.
It's 1:31, so we can wrap up. And thank you so much for the